The new film, What is a Woman? One Man's Journey to Answer the Question of a Generation. It's a documentary out by Matt Walsh at the Daily Wire. If you're not familiar with it, it is very important that you see it. It'll shake you up. It's a major work, and now the book accompanying it has just been released. Again, What is a Woman? The book is up at DennisPrager.com. And it's a delight to welcome Matt Walsh to the show. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
Indeed. I asked you off the air, how long did it take for you to make this documentary?
Yeah, it was a solid year. We first came up with the idea back in the beginning of the summer last year, and it was from that point to release was about a year, and good portion of that was actually on the road filming.
Were you surprised by what you learned in the course of that year?
I actually was, and I was surprised by how much I was surprised, because I kind of thought that going into this, I figured, well, I'm pretty invested in this issue. I know quite a bit about it, I thought. And but there were a lot of revelations even to me. And really the first thing that I learned that I didn't know was just how pervasive and widespread this confusion is, or this apparent confusion, because we talked to, and only a small fraction of it actually is in the film. You know, most of it can't make it in for time reasons, but we talked to dozens and dozens of people all over the country, just man on the street type interviews, and didn't matter where we were or who we were talking to or how old they were. Almost everybody seemed to be confused about basic questions of men versus women and basic questions of biological reality.
Were they confused because, they're not familiar with chromosomes, or they can't identify specific body parts to a woman or to a man? Or are they confused because they have been confused by the culture into believing that there's no definition?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of the latter, confused by the culture. And I also think that's why I say it's apparent confusion, because I picked up on it. In fact, some people told us outright that they can't talk about this issue on camera because they're afraid that they'll lose their job, they'll lose their friends, their reputation, right? So I think there were a lot of people that we talked to who were just afraid, in their hearts, in their minds, they know the difference between a man and a woman, but they're afraid to talk about it. So I think that's a lot of it too. And that actually, to me, is I think even scarier. The idea of everyone really being confused about what a woman is scary, but then to me it's even more frightening when you consider that most of these people know, but they're actually afraid to simply say out loud something like, well, women, they're the ones who have babies, right? That has become this unspeakable truth. And the fact that it's unspeakable that's filtered down to just average people walking around on the street.
Did you find a difference at all based on age?
I thought that we would, honestly. That's what I was expecting, but no. And this is all anecdotal, of course. But in my experience, when we pulled somebody aside and they appeared to be older, I figured we would get some just basic, straight to the point, common sense truth, and that's not what we found. We did find some people who were willing to speak the truth and just say, hey, here's what a woman is, but it was hard to predict based on their demographics and age ahead of time what somebody would say.
How do you explain older people being confused?
Well, I think it's the same way you explain Joe Biden, right? I mean, any of these Democrats who have been on the scene for decades, and for most of their public life, they never said anything about transgenderism. They never said anything about gender fluidity or any of this stuff. Never talked about it. And then the last 5 years, they're pretending to care so deeply about it. And I think it's the same thing for anybody else in that age bracket or any age bracket that just, they live in this society, and you can look around and see what's happening and see what the consequences could be potentially for revealing yourself to be a quote unquote transphobe.
If you didn't ask what is a woman, but rather asked, ma'am, sir, do you believe that men give birth? Do you think you would have gotten a different answer?
Well, we did ask. We asked a series of questions, and I asked a question like that to lots of people, and that can clarify it a little bit. I think that there are more people willing to say no to that, But even that, I mean, you would be surprised by the number of people who either say, well, sure, a man can give birth, or just, they'll do the Katanji Brown-Jackson routine and kind of dance around it. Oh, well, I'm not an expert. I'm not a biologist. Or, a lot of this retreating to relativism and saying, well, it depends on your truth. It's everyone's, everyone has their own truth and that sort of thing.
The irony about Katanji's answer is that we would agree with her. A biologist would give you the right answer. That's the irony of that response, because the left denies that biology determines gender.
Yeah, that's a good point. She's admitting in the answer that it's a biological question, which you would think she was trying not to get in trouble, and you would think that answer would still get her in trouble with the trans activists. But it didn't, and I think because it's almost like there's this wink and a nod between the two, where they knew what she was trying to do, which was she was just trying to get around it, and so they respect that at least. Like, at least you didn't answer it. You're trying to get around it because you know that if you answer it, that you're gonna have to deal with us. So it's still, even though, as you say, ironically, it only confirms what she's trying to deny, it still is an act of submission to the LGBT cult. And so I think that they were willing to accept it for that reason, I guess.
I'm speaking with Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire. He has a new book and documentary out, What is a Woman? Subtitle is One Man's Journey to Answer the Question of a Generation. What if let me put it this way, would you have had a different response if you asked, what is a man?
Yeah, lots of people ask me that. First of all, why ask what is a woman rather than what is a man, and would the answer be different? I tend to think it wouldn't be different. I think people would still be kind of dancing around it. But that is an interesting question. But for me, why ask what is a woman instead of what is a man? Well, part of it is just you could really ask either one, because if you can answer one question,
right? But as odd as it sounds, women are more distinctive.
Yeah. That's true, and
there's just more going on in being a female.
Yeah, I think so, and there's more. It's more of a womanhood has become more of a battleground, I suppose, in a certain way.
How is the film doing?
It's doing extremely well. It's doing enormously well. I mean, we expected it to. Yeah, we thought it would resonate, but I think it's. Fortunately, it's been able to reach outside of the kind of conservative podcast bubble, which is where I spend all my time, and it's been able to get outside of that. And I've heard from a lot of people who don't, they're consider themselves moderate, even people that consider themselves on the left, that have seen it and reacted really.
Yes. So where does one see the documentary?
You can go to you can watch it on Daily Wire, but you can go to whatiswoman.com and download it from there.
And the book is up at DennisPrager.com. Matt Walsh, you're doing great work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.